Eliza Hart had long grown used to being overlooked. In the small, quiet town where she lived, life followed a predictable rhythm, one that never seemed to include her dreams. Each morning she woke before sunrise, helped with chores, and moved through the day as if she were simply filling space in someone else's story. People knew her name, but not her heart. They saw her presence, but not her potential. She often found herself standing by the window in the evenings, watching the horizon as the sky faded into soft shades of gold and blue. Somewhere beyond those distant hills, she believed life must be different, bigger, brighter, meant for someone like her if only she had the courage to reach for it. But courage is a difficult thing to hold on to when you've been told your whole life to stay where you belong. One chilly afternoon, as autumn leaves scattered across the dusty road, a letter arrived. It wasn't unusual for the household to receive mail, but this one was different. Her name, Eliza Hart, was written clearly on the front in firm, careful handwriting. She frowned slightly as she turned it over in her hands. She wasn't expecting anything. No one wrote to her. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly folded. The words were simple, direct, honest. The man who wrote it introduced himself as Caleb Boone, a rancher from the western frontier. He explained that life out there was quiet, honest work, but lonely. He wasn't looking for anything fancy or fleeting. He was looking for a partner, someone to share responsibilities, build a home, and create a future together. There was no poetry, no grand promises, just truth. He wrote that he believed in respect, in kindness, and in giving someone the freedom to choose their own path. If she was interested, she could write back or come and meet him in person. If not, he wished her well, with no expectations. That was it. Eliza read the letter once. Then again, and again. There was something about it that didn't feel like the others she had heard of, stories of desperate arrangements or forced decisions. This felt different. It felt like an invitation, not a demand. For the first time in a long while, her heart stirred with something unfamiliar. Hope. She folded the letter carefully and held it close, her thoughts racing. It sounded impossible, traveling such a distance alone, meeting a man she had never seen, leaving behind everything she had ever known. It should have frightened her, and it did. But beneath the fear was something stronger, a quiet voice whispering that this might be her chance. Not just to meet Caleb Boone, but to step into a life she had never been allowed to imagine. That evening, as the household settled into its usual routine, Eliza sat alone with the letter resting in her lap. The fire crackled softly nearby, but she barely noticed. Her mind was already miles away, tracing a path across open plains and endless skies. What if this was real? What if he meant every word? And what if she said no, and spent the rest of her life wondering what might have been? The thought settled heavily in her chest. Eliza had spent years choosing the safe path, the expected path. And where had it led her? To quiet regrets and unanswered questions. She looked down at the letter again, her fingers tightening slightly around the paper. Maybe this wasn't just about him. Maybe this was about her. About proving to herself more than anyone that she was capable of making her own choices, that she didn't have to remain invisible in a life she never chose. The decision didn't come all at once. It built slowly, like the first light of dawn creeping across the horizon. A realization, steady and undeniable. By the time the fire burned low and the house fell silent, Eliza knew what she had to do. She would go, not because she was certain of what waited for her, but because she was finally ready to find out. Next morning, before anyone else had risen, Eliza packed a small bag with her few belongings. She paused only once, glancing back at the room that had held her for so long. There was no anger in her heart, only quiet determination. As she stepped outside, The air was crisp and new, carrying the promise of a journey unlike any she had ever known. Clutching the letter one last time, Eliza whispered softly to herself, "This is my chance." And with that, she took her first step toward a life she had only ever dreamed of, a journey that would carry her over 1,000 miles. And closer to the unknown than she had ever dared to go. The train station was quieter than Eliza expected. A thin veil of morning mist hovered over the tracks, softening the sharp edges of the world she was about to leave behind. A few travelers stood scattered along the platform, their luggage neatly stacked beside them, their faces marked with anticipation or routine. But for Eliza, this moment felt different. This wasn't routine. This was everything. She tightened her grip on the small leather bag in her hand, the letter from Caleb Boone tucked safely inside. It had already begun to feel like more than paper. It was a promise of something unknown, something waiting, or perhaps something hoping. As the train arrived with a low, steady rumble, Eliza felt her heartbeat quicken. For a fleeting second, doubt crept in, whispering questions she couldn't easily silence. What if she was wrong? What if this journey led nowhere? But just as quickly as the doubts came, she remembered the quiet certainty she had felt the night before, that steady pull forward, that voice that told her she deserved more than a life chosen by others. And so, without allowing herself another moment to hesitate, Eliza stepped onto the train. The first few hours passed in silence. Eliza sat by the window, watching as her familiar world slowly slipped away. The clustered homes, the narrow streets, the people she had known all her life, they faded into distance until they became nothing more than blurred shapes against the horizon. In their place came something new. Open fields stretched endlessly, painted in soft shades of gold and green. The sky seemed wider here, more alive, as though it held stories she had never been told. For the first time in years, Eliza allowed herself to simply watch. To breathe. To feel. Days passed, and the journey unfolded in stages. The train carried her as far as it could, but beyond that lay rougher paths, wagon roads that wound through quiet towns and open plains. Each transition felt like stepping deeper into a world she had only imagined. She met people along the way, a kind older woman who offered her warm bread and gentle conversation during a stop at a small town, a traveling family who shared stories by lantern light, their laughter filling the cool night air, a quiet man who tipped his hat respectfully and reminded her which roads were safest to follow. They were strangers, yet, in their own small ways, they reminded her that the world wasn't as cold or distant as she had once believed. Still, not every moment was easy. There were long stretches of silence where the land felt too vast, too empty. Nights when the wind whispered through the open plains, carrying with it a loneliness that settled deep in her chest. During those moments, Eliza would reach for the letter. She didn't need to read it anymore. She already knew every word, but holding it grounded her. It reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place. It reminded her that somewhere ahead, someone was waiting. As the days turned into a week, something inside Eliza began to change. The girl who had once stood quietly by a window, watching life pass her by, was no longer the same. Each mile she traveled seemed to strengthen something within her, a quiet resilience she hadn't known. She possessed. She learned to trust herself. To navigate unfamiliar roads. To speak when needed, and to stand firm in her decisions. The fear that had once felt overwhelming began to soften, replaced by something steadier. Confidence. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and crimson, Eliza found herself riding in a wagon headed toward the final stretch of her journey. The driver, a friendly man with a weathered face, gestured ahead with a small smile. "Not much farther now," he said. "You'll be reaching Boone territory by tomorrow." Eliza's breath caught slightly at the words tomorrow. After all the miles, all the days, all the uncertainty. It was finally real. Her fingers tightened gently around the edge of her shawl as she looked out at the vast land before her. The air felt different here, cleaner, quieter, filled with a kind of stillness that spoke of something untouched. This was his world, Caleb Boone's world. And soon she would be standing in it. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Eliza lay awake beneath the open sky, her thoughts swirling between excitement and uncertainty. She had come so far farther than she had ever imagined possible, but the biggest step still lay ahead. Meeting him, the stranger who had written a simple letter and unknowingly changed the course of her life. She turned slightly, gazing up at the endless stretch of stars above her for the first time. They didn't feel distant. They felt close, like silent witnesses to the journey she had taken, and one still waiting to begin. As dawn approached, soft light began to spill across the horizon. Eliza sat up slowly, her heart steady but full. This was it, the end of the journey, and the beginning of something entirely new. And as the wagon began to move once more, carrying her toward the unknown, one thought settled quietly in her mind. No matter what happened next, she had already changed. By the time Eliza reached the edge of Boone territory, the sun had just begun its slow descent. The land stretched wide and open in every direction, rolling plains touched by golden light, distant hills rising gently against the horizon, and a silence so deep it felt almost sacred. There were no crowded streets, no hurried footsteps, no noise to fill the air. Only space, only stillness, only truth. The wagon came to a gradual stop near a simple wooden fence that marked the entrance to a modest ranch. Eliza's breath caught slightly as she looked ahead. This was it. Her journey, every mile, every moment of doubt and courage had led her here. The driver offered her a small, reassuring nod. "This is the place," he said gently. Eliza stepped down slowly, her boots meeting the dry earth with a soft crunch. For a moment, she simply stood there, her heart beating steadily as her eyes took in the scene before her. A barn stood off to one side, weathered but strong. A small house rested near it, its porch shaded and quiet. A few horses grazed peacefully nearby, their movements calm and unhurried. It wasn't grand. It wasn't impressive, but it felt real. Before she could gather her thoughts, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Slow, measured, certain. Eliza turned, and there he was, Caleb Boone. He wasn't standing far away, just a few steps from the porch, as though he had been waiting, but hadn't wanted to rush her arrival. He wore a simple hat, his shirt sleeves rolled slightly, his posture relaxed but grounded. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Eliza had imagined this moment countless times during her journey. She had wondered what he would look like, how he would greet her, what words he might say. But standing here now, face to face with him, all those imagined versions faded away, because the real moment was quieter. More honest. Caleb removed his hat. Slowly, holding it at his side, a small gesture, but one filled with respect. "You made it," he said. His voice was calm, steady, carrying none of the tension she had expected. There was no pressure in it, no claim, just acknowledgement. Eliza swallowed softly, nodding once. "I did." A faint smile touched his lips, not wide or overwhelming, but genuine. "I'm glad." That was all. No grand speeches, no expectations, just two simple words. For a moment, silence settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was careful, like two people standing at the edge of something important, unsure how to step forward, but willing to try. Caleb gestured lightly toward the house. "You must be tired. It's been a long journey." Eliza nodded again, her hands tightening slightly around the strap of her bag. "It has." He stepped aside, giving her space to walk ahead if she wished. And she noticed that how he didn't lead her, didn't assume, didn't take control. He simply allowed. Eliza took a small step forward, then another, moving toward the house. She could feel his presence beside her, steady but never overwhelming. Inside, the home was simple but warm. A wooden table sat near the window. A small fire crackled softly in the corner, and everything, from the neatly arranged shelves to the clean floors, spoke of quiet care. Caleb placed his hat down near the door. "I wasn't sure what you'd prefer," he said, "so I prepared the spare room. You can stay as long as you need." Eliza looked at him, surprised by the words. "As long as I need?" She repeated softly. He nodded. "You came a long way. That doesn't mean you owe me anything." The words settled deeply in her chest. All her life, choices had come with expectations, conditions, invisible chains that tied her decisions to someone else's approval. But here, standing in this quiet home, with a man who spoke gently and meant what he said, it felt different. For the first time since her arrival, Eliza allowed herself to breathe fully. Later that evening, they sat across from each other at the small wooden table, sharing a simple meal. Conversation didn't come easily at first. There were pauses, careful words, moments where both seemed unsure of what to say next. But slowly, something began to shift. Caleb asked about her journey, not out of curiosity alone, but with genuine interest. He listened more than he spoke, his attention steady, his presence reassuring. And Eliza, despite her initial hesitation, found herself answering honestly. She spoke of the long roads, the people she met, the doubts she faced, and he listened, not to judge, not to interrupt, but to understand. As the evening drew to a close, Eliza stepped outside onto the porch. The sky above was vast and filled with stars, brighter than she had ever seen before. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of earth and open land. She wrapped her shawl around herself, her thoughts quiet but full. Footsteps approached behind her. Caleb stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "Even now, if you decide this isn't what you want," he said calmly, "I'll help you get back. No questions, no hard feelings." Eliza turned slightly, studying his expression in the soft glow of the lantern light. There was no hesitation in him. No hidden meaning. Just truth. And something inside her shifted, because she realized, in that moment, that this man, the stranger she had traveled 1,000 miles to meet, was not someone who would take her freedom. He was someone who would protect it. Eliza looked back out at the endless horizon, her heart steady. She didn't have all the answers yet. She didn't know what the future would bring. But for the first time since this journey began, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The first morning at the ranch began before sunrise. Eliza woke to a quiet she wasn't used to, not the heavy silence of loneliness, but something softer, more alive. Through the small window of her room, she could see the sky just beginning to lighten, a pale wash of blue stretching over the horizon. For a moment, she lay still, listening. There was no rush of footsteps, no distant chatter, only the faint sound of wind brushing across the open land. And somewhere nearby, the gentle movement of horses. It felt unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. When Eliza stepped outside, the air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of earth and morning dew. She spotted Caleb near the barn, already at work, moving with steady purpose as he tended to the animals. He noticed her almost immediately, but didn't call out or wave her over. Instead, he simply gave a small nod, acknowledging her presence, without interrupting her choice to join him or not. That small gesture stayed with her. It was always like that with him. No pressure, no expectations. Just space. Over the next few days, Eliza found herself slowly stepping into the rhythm of ranch life. At first, she only watched. She observed how he was moved through his day, how he worked with quiet focus, how he cared for the animals with patience, how he fixed broken fences or carried heavy loads without complaint. There was a calm strength in everything he did. Not loud, not showy, just dependable. Eventually, Eliza began to help Dot. It started small, bringing water, gathering supplies, assisting with simple tasks. At times she hesitated, unsure if she was doing things correctly, but Caleb never corrected her harshly. If anything, he guided her with a kind of quiet encouragement. Like this, he would say gently, showing her without making her feel inadequate. And when she got something right, he didn't overpraise, just a simple nod or a soft, good. It meant more than words. Days turned into a steady routine. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, speaking when needed, but never forcing conversation. And somehow, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt shared. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm, fading colors. Those moments became something Eliza quietly looked forward to. At first, they spoke only of simple things, the weather, the work, the land. But gradually, those conversations began to deepen. Caleb told her about the ranch, how he had built it from almost nothing, how the land had tested him but also shaped him. Eliza listened, fascinated by the life he had created. Then, one evening, he asked about her. Not casually, not as an afterthought. But with real intention. Eliza hesitated at first. Her past wasn't something she spoke of easily. It was filled with quiet disappointments, unspoken expectations, and a life where her voice had often been overlooked. But there was something in the way Caleb listened, steady, patient, without judgment, that made it easier. So, slowly, she began to share. She spoke of her small town, of the routines that never changed, of the feeling of being unseen, of wanting more, but never knowing how to reach for it. Caleb didn't interrupt. He didn't offer quick solutions or empty reassurances. He just listened, and somehow, that was exactly what she needed. As the days passed, something began to shift between them. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't overwhelming. It was subtle. A glance that lingered a second longer than before. A shared smile over something small. The quiet understanding that grew without needing to be spoken aloud. Eliza began to notice things she hadn't before. The way Caleb always made sure she walked on the safer side of a path. The way he adjusted his pace without mentioning it so she could keep up comfortably. The way his presence, even in silence, made the world feel steadier. And Caleb, though he said little, seemed to notice her too. The way she approached each new task with determination. The way her confidence grew with each passing day. The quiet strength she carried, even when she doubted herself. But despite the growing connection, there was still a distance between them. Not physical. Emotional. Both of them carried pasts that had taught them to be careful, to guard their hearts, to move slowly when it came to trust. And so, without ever saying it aloud, they both held back just a little, not out of fear. The morning began like any other. Soft light stretched across the plains, the air cool and still, carrying the quiet promise of another steady day. Eliza had already fallen into the rhythm of ranch life, early mornings, simple tasks, and the unspoken comfort of knowing what came next. For the first time in her life, routine didn't feel like a cage. It felt like peace. She was near the fence line, carefully tying a loose section of rope, when she heard it, the distant sound of approaching wheels. At first, she didn't think much of it. Travelers occasionally passed through nearby roads. It wasn't unusual, but something about this felt different. The sound grew louder, more deliberate, until it came to a stop not far from the house. Eliza straightened slowly, her hands stilling, as a quiet tension settled in her chest. a feeling she hadn't experienced since she left home. Caleb noticed it too. From across the yard he turned, his gaze steady as he looked toward the approaching figure stepping down from a carriage. He didn't move immediately, he didn't rush, but there was a subtle shift in him, quiet alertness that hadn't been there before. The man who arrived was well-dressed, his posture rigid, his expression confident in a way that felt familiar. Too familiar. Eliza's breath caught. She knew him, not by chance. Not by coincidence, but from a part of her life she had tried very hard to leave behind. His name was Thomas Hawley. A man from her town. A man who had once spoken as though her future had already been decided, one that included him. Whether she agreed or not, there had never been kindness in his words, only expectation, only assumption. And now he was here. "Eliza," he called, his voice carrying easily across the open space. The sound of her name in his voice made something inside her tighten. For a brief moment, the strength she had built over the past weeks wavered. Old memories surfaced of quiet pressure, of being spoken for rather than spoken to, a feeling like her choices were never truly her own. She took a small step back, not out of weakness, but out of instinct. Caleb moved then, not quickly, not aggressively, just enough to stand within reach, close enough to be present, but not so close that it felt like he was taking over. He didn't speak, he didn't intervene, but his presence was steady. Grounded. And somehow, that alone made a difference. Thomas approached, stopping a few feet away, his gaze shifting between Eliza and Caleb with clear disapproval. "I've been looking for you," he said, his tone controlled but firm. "You left without a word." Eliza swallowed, her hands tightening slightly at her sides. "I made my choice," she replied quietly. He let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. "A choice?" he repeated. "You ran off to the middle of nowhere for a stranger." "That's not a choice, Eliza. That's a mistake." The words landed harder than she expected, not because they were true, but because they echoed the doubts she had once carried. Before she could respond, Caleb spoke. His voice was calm. Even, but unmistakably firm. "She made it here just fine," he said. "That sounds like a choice to me." Thomas turned his attention to him, his expression sharpening slightly. "And you are?" he asked. Caleb Boone. There was no need for more. No need for explanation. The name alone seemed to settle something in the air. A brief silence followed. Then Thomas looked back at Eliza, his tone shifting, not softer, but more insistent. "You don't belong here," he said. "This isn't your life. Come back with me. We can fix this." Fix this. As though her decision was something broken. Eliza felt the weight of those words pressing against her. This was the moment, the kind she had avoided her entire life. The moment where it would be easier to stay quiet, to let someone else decide, to step back into the life that required nothing from her but obedience. Her heart pounded. Her thoughts raced. And for a second, she almost did. Then she felt it. Not a touch, not a pull, but a presence. Caleb stood beside her, silent, unmoving, but steady in a way that grounded everything around her. He wasn't stepping in. He wasn't speaking for her. He was simply there, trusting her to choose, and something inside Eliza shifted. Not suddenly, but firmly. She straightened, her voice quiet but stronger than it had ever been. "I do belong here," she said. Thomas frowned slightly. "You don't mean that." "I do." Her hands steadied at her sides. "This was my decision," she continued. "Not yours, not anyone else's, mine." The words hung in the air. Clear. Unshaken. For the first time, Thomas didn't have an immediate response. Because for the first time, Eliza wasn't someone he could speak over. After a long pause, he exhaled slowly, his expression tightening. "You'll regret this." he said, but there was less certainty in his voice now, less control. Eliza met his gaze, her heart steady. "No," she replied softly, "I won't." The silence that followed felt different, lighter, freer, and after a moment, Thomas turned, returning to his carriage without another word. The sound of wheels faded into the distance until it was gone completely. Eliza didn't move right away. She stood there, breathing slowly, letting the moment settle, letting the past finally release its hold. Beside her, Caleb spoke quietly. "You did that on your own." Eliza nodded, her gaze still fixed on the open horizon. "Yes," she said, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. The dust from the departing carriage had long settled, but something within Eliza was still shifting. She stood near the fence line, her gaze fixed on the empty road where Thomas had disappeared. The silence that followed his departure felt deeper than before, not heavy, not uncertain, but full of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. The wind moved gently across the open land, brushing against her dress, carrying with it the quiet strength of the place she had come to know. Just days ago, this same land had felt unfamiliar, almost overwhelming in its vastness. Now, it felt different. It felt like it was listening. Waiting. Behind her, she heard Caleb's footsteps approach, steady and unhurried. He didn't come too close, just enough to be there without interrupting her thoughts. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need. Some moments didn't require words. "You can still change your mind," Caleb said quietly after a "well." Eliza turned slightly, surprised not by the words, but by the calm sincerity in them. "There's no pressure to stay," he continued. "What happened today? It doesn't have to decide anything for you." His tone held no expectation, no hidden meaning, just the same honesty he had shown her from the very beginning. Eliza studied him for a moment. This man, who had every opportunity to convince her, to ask her to stay, to hold on to what they had begun to build, was instead offering her the freedom to walk away. Again. And somehow, that made her choice clearer than ever. "I know," she said softly. Her voice was steady now, stronger, not because she had something to prove, but because she finally understood what she wanted. She turned fully to face him, the fading light of the afternoon catching in her eyes. "When I left home," she began, "I thought this journey was about finding something better, something different." She paused, her thoughts settling into place, but it wasn't just that. Caleb listened, his expression unchanged but attentive. "It was about finding out who I am, when no one else is deciding for me," she continued. Words came more easily now, more honestly. "I didn't realize how much of my life had already been planned by others until I stepped away from it." A quiet understanding passed between them, not spoken, but felt. Eliza took a small breath, glancing briefly toward the open land before returning her gaze to him. "When he showed up today, I was afraid," she admitted. "Not of him," she added quickly, "but of slipping back into the person I used to be." Caleb nodded once, as if he understood more than she had said. "But I didn't," she said. There was a quiet strength in those words, a realization. "I stood there, and for the first time, I didn't feel small." The wind picked up slightly, lifting a loose strand of her hair as she spoke. "I made that choice," she continued, "to stay, to speak, to stand my ground." She met his eyes, unwavering now, "and I want to keep making that choice." A brief silence followed, but this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was steady. "I'm not here because I ran away anymore," Eliza said softly. "I'm here because I want to be." The words settled between them, simple but powerful. Not a promise, not a declaration, just truth. Caleb held her gaze for a moment longer before giving a small nod. "No dramatic reaction, no overwhelming response, Just quiet acceptance. That's all that matters, he said, and somehow those words meant everything. As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the land, they walked back toward the house together, not side by side out of obligation, but naturally, easily, like something that had found its place. That evening felt different. The air seemed lighter, the silence more comfortable than ever before. They shared a simple meal, as they had many times already, but now there was something unspoken between them. Not tension, not uncertainty, but a quiet understanding. Later, as Eliza stepped out onto the porch once more, she looked out across the land that had once felt so distant, so unknown. Now it felt steady beneath her. Real, like something she could build on. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the miles, the doubts, the risks. And for the first time, she didn't see it as something uncertain. She saw it as something necessary. Every step, every moment, every choice. Behind her, the door opened softly as Caleb stepped out, joining her without a word. They stood there together, looking out at the horizon as the last light of day faded into night. Eliza smiled slightly, her voice quiet but sure. The days that followed felt different. Not in a way that could be easily seen, but in a way that could be felt in the quiet pauses, the shared glances, the ease that had slowly replaced uncertainty. Eliza no longer woke wondering if she belonged. She knew she did. Morning light spilled across the ranch as usual, soft and golden, but now it seemed warmer somehow, familiar, like it welcomed her instead of testing her. She moved through her day with confidence, no longer hesitant in her steps. Tasks that once felt new now felt natural. The rhythm of the ranch had become her own, and Caleb, he had changed too. Not in who he was, but in how much of himself he allowed her to see. He spoke a little more now, not all at once, not in long speeches, but in small pieces, moments where he shared thoughts he once kept to himself, stories about the early days of the ranch, the mistakes he made, the long nights when he wasn't sure if any of it would work. He didn't tell these stories to impress her. He told them because he trusted her. One evening, as they worked near the barn, Eliza struggled to lift a heavy wooden crate. She paused, adjusting her grip, determination written across her face, before she could try again. Caleb stepped forward. "Here," he said gently, but instead of taking it from her, he adjusted her hands, showing her how to balance the weight. Better. Her hands brushed briefly, a small moment, but it lingered. Eliza looked up, meeting his eyes. There was something there now, something deeper than before. Not just understanding. Connection. Double quotes like that? She asked softly. Caleb nodded. Like that. His voice was quieter than usual. And for a second, neither of them moved. It was in moments like these that everything shifted, not suddenly, not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty that neither of them could ignore anymore. What had started as two strangers sharing space had become something more. Something steady. Something real. That night, the sky stretched wide and clear above them, filled with stars that seemed brighter than ever. They sat on the porch as they often did, the silence between them no longer cautious, but comfortable, like a shared language they both understood. Eliza pulled her shawl closer around her shoulders. Though the night wasn't particularly cold. It wasn't the air that made her feel this way. It was the moment. "I used to think love had to be loud," she said suddenly. Caleb glanced at her, listening. "Something dramatic," she continued. "Something that swept you away all at once." She gave a small, thoughtful smile. "But this." She paused, searching for the right words. "This feels different." Caleb leaned back slightly, his gaze lifting briefly toward the sky before returning to her. "How so?" he asked. Eliza hesitated for just a moment, not out of fear, but because what she was about to say mattered. "It feels steady," she said, like something you can trust. Something that doesn't need to prove itself. Her voice softened. Something that grows instead of rushing. The words settled between them, quiet but undeniable. Caleb didn't respond right away, but his expression shifted subtly, deeply. "I've never been good with words," he said after a moment. Eliza smiled slightly. "I've noticed." A faint hint of humor passed between them, lightening the weight of the moment. "But I mean what I say," he continued. His voice was calm, but there was something stronger beneath it now, something certain. Eliza's breath caught slightly as she held his gaze. "When you first got here," Caleb said, "I didn't expect anything." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I just hoped maybe we could build something honest." Eliza listened, her heart steady but full. "But somewhere along the way," he continued, "it stopped being just about that." His eyes didn't leave hers. "It became about you." The words were simple, but they carried everything he hadn't said before. Silence followed, not empty, not uncertain, but full of meaning. Eliza felt it then, the realization she had been slowly coming to over the past days. Now clear and undeniable. This wasn't just comfort. This wasn't just trust. It was love, not the kind she had imagined before, not loud or overwhelming or uncertain, but something stronger. Something that had been built piece by piece, through every shared moment, every quiet understanding, every choice they had made to trust one another. She took a small breath, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't come here looking for that," she admitted. Caleb nodded slightly. "I know, but I found it anyway." The words lingered in the air between them. Simple, honest, true. For a moment, neither of them moved. They didn't need to. Nothing needed to be rushed. Nothing needed to be proven, because everything they had built was already there. As the night stretched on, the stars above them steady and endless, Eliza felt a quiet certainty settle deep within her. She hadn't just found a place to stay. She hadn't just found herself. She had found someone who saw her. Who respected her. Who chose her freely, without expectation. And for the first time in her life, she chose the same in return. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly. No grand announcements, no crowded preparations. Just the soft glow of dawn stretching across the open land, as if the world itself had chosen to witness the moment in silence. Eliza stood near the window, her hands resting lightly against the wooden frame as she looked out across the ranch. The same land that had once felt so distant now felt like home. A gentle breeze moved through the air, carrying with it the familiar sense of earth and morning light. Somewhere in the distance, horses shifted softly, their quiet presence grounding everything in calm reality. This was her life. Now, not something imagined, not something borrowed, but something she had chosen. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories come. The small town she had left behind. The letter that changed everything. The long journey filled with uncertainty. The moment she first stepped onto this land, unsure of what she would find. And then, Caleb. A faint smile touched her lips, not because everything had been perfect, but because everything had been real. A soft knock came at the door. "Eliza?" A gentle voice called from outside, a neighbor from a nearby ranch who had come to help with a simple ceremony. "It's time." Eliza took a slow breath, her heart steady. No fear, no doubt, only quiet certainty. When she stepped outside, the world seemed to pause. A small gathering had formed near the open field, just a few familiar faces, people who had come to know her over the past weeks. There were no decorations beyond what nature had already provided. The wide sky. The open land. The soft golden light of morning. It was enough. And then she saw him. Caleb stood a short distance away, waiting. He looked much the same as he always did, simple, steady, grounded. but there was something different in his expression. Something softer, something open, for a brief moment. Everything else faded. The people dot the place. The world. There was only the path between them, and the step she chose to take. Eliza walked forward slowly, her heart full but calm. Each step felt certain, not rushed or uncertain, but grounded in everything that had brought her here. When she reached him, they stood facing each other, close enough to feel the quiet presence they had come to rely on. No elaborate words were needed. No long vows or promises shaped by expectation, because everything they had built had already been spoken in the days before. Still, the moment held its own kind of meaning, a quiet acknowledgement, a shared understanding. Caleb looked at her, his voice low but steady. "You sure about this?" he asked. Eliza smiled gently, not because she needed to think, but because she already knew. "Yes," she said. That single word carried everything. Every mile she had traveled, every fear she had faced, every choice she had made to stand in her own truth. The ceremony itself was simple. A few words spoken, a quiet exchange of promises, not about perfection, but about partnership, about respect, about choosing each other every day, without losing themselves in the process. When it was done, nothing dramatic changed. There was no sudden shift, no overwhelming moment, just a quiet sense of something settling into place. Later, as the small gathering slowly faded and the day stretched on, Eliza found herself once again standing on the porch beside Caleb. The same place where so many of their conversations had begun, the same place where everything had slowly taken shape. She looked out at the horizon, the land endless and open before her, but it no longer felt unknown. It felt like possibility. "I used to be afraid of all this," she admitted softly. Caleb glanced at her. "The land?" She shook her head slightly, a small smile forming. "The future." He nodded, understanding more than she needed to explain. They stood there in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that didn't need to be filled. After a moment, Eliza spoke. "Again, I thought I came here for you," she said. Caleb raised an eyebrow slightly. "Curious, but I didn't," she continued. "I came here for me." She turned to look at him fully, her expression calm but full of quiet certainty. "And somehow, that led me to you." Caleb didn't respond right away. He didn't need to, because some truths didn't require words. Instead, he simply nodded once, his presence as steady as ever. The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the land as the day slowly gave way to evening. And as Eliza stood there, no longer the girl who had watched life from behind a window, but someone who had stepped into it fully, she felt something she had never truly known before. Not just happiness, not just peace, but belonging. She hadn't just crossed 1,000 miles of land. She had crossed fear. The weight of a life she never chose. And on the other side, she hadn't just found love, she had found herself.